everybody. Welcome back to Starkey Farmstead. My name is Samantha. Doctrines of Devils. Abstaining from American beef. You guys, we're really going to get into this topic. We're going to talk about toxins in the environment. We're going to talk about vegans turn regenerative farmers and so much more. Welcome back to you guys who have been on our platform for a while, and welcome to all you newbies. My name is Samantha. I run a 2-acre farmstead in Southeast Louisiana. My husband and I are totally debt-free. We run this 2-acre farmstead, totally organic, regenerative, and we have small livestock here. There's a fine line that you walk when you are going for quality product and still being able to make a profit doing what you were called by God to do. The first thing we learned is you got to cut those credit cards up. You cannot depend on that because if they're there, you're going to use them. Let's start with the 1860s to the 1940s when you saw the destruction of American religion and the American family. So during this period of time, you had something called orphan trains. Now, a lot of people have their own theories as to why there were thousands upon thousands of orphans in America during that time period. My personal belief is this is also the period of time that you see a lot of mental institutions created, what they called nut houses. And I think what they did was they took your religious majority, your very conservative people, and they basically said they were crazy. They said that these people were insane for believing in a higher power and living a good life. And they mentally instituted both mother and father leaving children orphaned, right? So you see kids being shipped all over the country and the destruction of the American family. Then you see kind of a crossover because that was up until like the 40s. Somewhere around 1920 and the Great Dust Bowl all the way into like the 1970s, you see the destruction of American agriculture kick in. A lot of policies that went against homesteaders and farms, family-owned farms, and you see a push towards CAFO systems, which is consolidated animal feedlots, and you see things like government-controlled agriculture, and you see global enterprise-controlled agriculture, big ag, with a lot of chemicals. At the same time, around the 1950s till now, you see big medicine kick in, okay? So all those are like overlapping and they're all working for one reason, the destruction of America. Now, in the 1960s up until about 2020, you see this movement of vegans, Satanism, mysticism take over in America. But about 2020, I like to call it the Great Awakening. Yeah. You see people realize we've been quiet too long. Watch this.
Strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
But and we've stayed, and a part of that weakness is just staying silent.
Yeah.
And thinking that other people, and I'll be the first one to say the church stayed way too silent for way too long on way too many issues where we should have been vocal, but out of wanting to show love and be Christ-like, we sat back trying to intentions were good, but we stayed way too silent on way too many issues. And so for us, like, we're like, no, we're going to talk about this stuff. We've got to make it known. It's not fear-mongering, because if we stay silent and just assume that the government's going to have our back and do the right thing, or big tech or big meat, that sounds weird.
It's not just the Great Awakening for the beef industry or people in the medical field going back to herbal healing and stuff, guys, or even people realizing that you can't shut down churches but leave barrooms open. It's not just that Great Awakening. It goes deeper. It's vegans realizing that you can't separate soil health from animal husbandry. Those two things go together like white on rice. And I'm being very serious, because even though I only have small livestock on my 2 acres, I depend on those worms and those rabbits and those chickens to provide my soil the living microorganisms and fertility that I need to produce the food at the quality and nutrient density that I am looking for, because food is medicine. And we have somehow forgotten that, you guys. So when I think of the Great Awakening, people are always talking about it's coming, it's coming. Folks, it is here. And we are living it. But it's so hard to look from the outside in and realize that you are in a historic movement, that if the world continues for another 100 years, generations past will look back and say, wow, those people living in 2020 didn't realize that they were changing the world, but we are. I want to introduce you to a vegan chef that went through, oh my gosh, this poor woman went through it. She was a renowned vegan chef that decided that she wanted to grow her own vegetables for her own restaurant. And folks, what she learned was that you cannot separate animals from the soil. And what happened to her is, I just want you to understand this. This wokeism, this left, everybody's included. No, it's not true. They're lying to you. You're only included in that club if you follow their rules. Watch this.
She's adding meat and dairy products to her formerly vegan menu.
Right, so there you go. Yeah, obviously not going to be a vegan restaurant anymore.
I don't condone any hatred, certainly not death threats or anything that are being thrown at Maui. But for her to be surprised.
Sage Vegan Bistro, an extremely vegan restaurant in Los Angeles, California.
Announced the menu changes, and then what? All of a sudden they descended on you and invaded your restaurant?
You're vegan because you think there's less death somehow associated with it. The eating only red meat, only beef is probably the least death. Grass-fed, grass-finished, red meat, beef, 100% of your diet is the least death possible, but that sounds crazy to a vegan and they're not going to want to hear that.
And know that it's going to be killed one day. I profoundly know what that is. I know what it is to bottle feed an animal that I know will feed my family later and care for it every 2 hours. I love cows. I love my cows. I can tell you, Angelica, the same age, and she took on both the boy and Angelica. I know every one of their story and I love them. And so the idea that I don't love cows because the end game of some of these cows will be that they're going to sustain human life by being consumed. That is the bond and the relationship between humans and cows. And humans have broke that bond by putting them in pretty fucked up situations. But I'm going to maintain that bond in a pure way. Is regenerative agriculture scalable? And I'm going to tell you the truth. It's way more scalable for animal protein than it is for vegetables. That's the truth. And people do not like that. So we're doing high stock density and we're moving our cows twice a day. And so you can see we have just 30 feet wide and then it's the width of the whole field. And so here's the wire for where they're gonna move in this afternoon. It's already been set up. And this is where they got moved into this morning. They're sharing this one shade tree behind me. And then tomorrow we'll move them here and here and they'll go all the way down the field until they graze the other side, until they get to the other side of the field. And then when they're done, we're gonna plant a cool season cover crop in here. If you play out the vegan agenda to the end, there is no cows. Where do the cows go? You have a couple in a zoo. They will say, well, cows are not natural and it is their wild counterparts will still exist. Well, I'm not sure that if you were to ask these girls, do you want to not exist? Is this life so bad, so much suffering, that you would rather your whole existence and all of your future generations to not exist? Because if we play out the vegan agenda, the cow has no more place in our world. And I love them enough to fight for their existence and to fight for what they provide. all of us. And I don't eat cow. Imagine that. I'm a vegetarian. People come here and migrate here and work with chemicals and quietly go back to their countries and die from what they're having to come in contact every single day for a cheap food system. So everybody who's screaming that my cows have a bad life, I hope you're also screaming for the farm workers that are suffering, that their entire lives are a sacrifice. They're 3,000 miles away from their children. They cannot go home and see them. They are sending money, and by the time they get home, they are sick, and it is not fair. There's so many farmers you can talk to that are doing this on a larger scale, and on less land, they have double or triple the cows, but this is scalable. If I do a cover crop in the off season, move the cows through, bring that fertility in, feed the microbiology, and then go back to vegetables. That's the easiest way to do it at scale for vegetables. And so now we're opening up all this land for grazing that's fallow half the year.
So there's a chef that's literally being run out of her vegan restaurant in Los Angeles. Now moving on. The wildfires in Maui. What they're finding a year later, folks, as they studied the groundwater, the wells, and the watersheds post-fire, is that even though the air quality might be back up to par, some of the water might not be safe, not just for drinking, but for animal agriculture and or land crop irrigation of the crops. So they just begin to realize that as all that plastic burnt and the water heated up inside of the plastic wells and the casings and all of that, that there were a lot of toxins, including heavy metals, that stayed behind. So yeah, there are some things you can do. You can flush out your wells, but you need to be concerned about plastic holding tanks absorbing these toxins and then slowly releasing them back over time. So as we're seeing more and more areas burn with these mysterious wildfires, right? I think that we all need to be concerned about the long-term toxins coming back into our food system, back into our agricultural production, and back into our water systems. Now, I do want to end this video on a good note, and that is there are actually some Old Testament prophecies coming true right now in Israel. I want to share these two clips with you because I want to give you hope. And I want you to realize that as a global society, we are currently at a turning point, folks. Either we're going to move into the one world system and the Antichrist is going to step forth, or we're going to awake enough people that we have a spiritual awakening worldwide and we push the Antichrist system back for one more generation. And just so you know, that is up to us, guys. So enjoy this. Please make sure you are still subscribed. Share this video. It's time to wake people up.
It's impossible. Really looking at this desolate place, imagining fishermen here, fruits in a place full of life is very difficult. Let's now listen to the prophecy from beginning to end, and then we will see each little part of it happening or starting to happen in today's days. The prophecy speaks of a river coming from Jerusalem, from the Temple of Jerusalem, and entering the Dead Sea and making its waters unhealthy, untamed. It says that here there will be many fish and fishermen and also fruit trees, but the mud will continue here. A very important part of Ezekiel's prophecy is that here in the region of the Dead Sea, around these rivers, there will be fruit trees. But it sounded a bit impossible. This land is salty. It gets up to almost 50 degrees here in the summer. And despite all of this, look at what's around me. The prophecy also in this part began to be fulfilled. And here we are seeing plantations, in this case a date plantation. Look here. This one here seems quite ripe. It's so sweet. I'll wait a little bit for you to taste it too. But there's a part of this prophecy that's a bit strange, which means that the fruits will never perish, but I'm seeing here part of the dates that fell on the ground. Here in this region, archaeological excavations were made, millennial date seeds were found, and they were planted, and they began to bloom. We can see this part of the prophecy to this day. So if you want Shlomi to take me to the far south of Israel, to Guys, there are more fish down there. Let's go film them now. You can feel them counting on everything nearby. And besides the fish, we also see aquatic plants here, which means this place is full. Look. Guys, the stomach is extracting algae. Let's keep the camera very still to try to film.